This is Tanya Lynn with the Sistership Circle podcast. From spirituality, sexuality, and sisterhood to business, relationships, contribution, and creativity, the Sistership Circle podcast introduces a new model of feminine leadership where women get real and vulnerable about it all. Tune in for authentic advice that will empower you to be bold, beautiful, and brilliant as your true self. Woohoo! We are live! This is Tanya Lynn with Sistership Circle, and I'm so excited for today's conversation. Yes, I've got Antia with me today, and I gotta tell you, this woman and I connected a few years back, and I had no idea that she would become one of my closest sisters today, and she has just been through so much with me over the past year. My goodness, it's been a year that we've been circling together in San Diego, and she's just showed up for me so big time. And you know what I love about Antia is she is someone who's really, really committed to growth, very, very accountable for being congruent with her word, and just such a beautiful space holder, and has been such a great sister to me. And, you know, the work that she does in the world of helping women to attract and maintain a relationship with a man is just so powerful. And so I wanted to bring her to not only share her expertise, but her experience, her story, because she's just been through so much. And, you know, coming to America from Germany, and just there's just so much that she has to offer. So, Antia, I'm so excited for you to be here. Thank you. And I'd love for you to just start off with sharing a little bit about your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Tanya. I'm so delighted to be here. So for me, everything started, like Tanya said, in case you can't detect from my accent, in Eastern Germany, where I grew up to an emotionally absent mother. And, you know, for one reason or another, she was just not able to show her emotions, like meaning hugs, affection, or words of affirmation. Like none of that was really common in our household. And so as a consequence, what we do is we would develop coping mechanisms, right? Because the pain was so big that, you know, I remember one day I wanted to crawl into my mom's bed. I must have been about 18 months old. So Tanya, you can really relate to that because your babes are, you know, in that age range. And she just rolled over and said, "Don't bother me." And so in that moment, I knew unconsciously that I wasn't safe, and that what I desired to have, my feminine light and expression, was not welcomed, was not safe to be expressed. And so I made sure that I don't need anyone, and I don't need to bother anyone for anything. So I became Miss Independent and went grocery shopping by the time I was 8 years old by myself, and just basically was like kind of like on my own. And actually, you know what, the sad part was I prided myself in it. I really thought like all my classmates, is such like mommy and daddy daughters, and, you know, they don't really know what it means to be, you know, grown up and to be mature. And so I think that was definitely one of my blind spots, was that I was carrying that with pride. And, you know, unfortunately translated to me attracting a lot of emotionally unavailable men into my life because, look, I was incongruent inside of myself. And so I attracted men into my life who were also incongruent in their life. That makes a lot of sense. We do live in a mirroring universe. However, back then I didn't know that. So I just went from being really excited and he's the man of my dreams and it's going to be the one, to completely crashing, just literally overnight, no warning whatsoever. And I just ended up feeling devastated and feeling rejected, feeling abandoned, and honestly, like wondering, what is wrong with me? Because I tried this several times. And so now as a good German, I told myself, you know, maybe I should just look at this from an academic angle. And so got myself out of Germany into UC Berkeley and studied personality psychology. And I said, okay, well, everybody has different personalities. And along the way, really found out why the dysfunctional dynamic I had with my mother directly translated into the dysfunctional dynamic I had with men. Because I did not necessarily make that connection on a logical level. And I understood attachment styles, right? How our relationship to our caregiver translates also to the dynamic and to the response giving that we have towards our lovers, our partners, our romances. And so that's when I, really started to turn a corner. Also started to study a lot of other things like masculine, feminine dynamics. I mean, you name it, I did it. I did every workshop you could possibly think of. And Tanya knows that I'm very, very committed. And my friends used to joke, they're like, oh, where can you find Antia on the weekends? In a seminar. Like you would not find me in a bar or a restaurant or a club, I was just absorbing everything. So anyways, long story short, I helped a lot of women in their 30s, 40s, 50s. It didn't really matter. And if they were attract the right men into their life. I did little workshops, little support groups. But unfortunately, it was still not happening for me. And I think that was like my biggest aha moment, because I was like, how can I have all the tools and the formula and the method that works? I worked so many women down the aisle. I was the maid of honor, but yet for some reason it wasn't applicable to me. And that's when I had to humble myself. Remember, I was so priding myself that I didn't need anyone. So I need to kind of get off that horse of pride and say, okay, maybe I need help. Maybe that's actually something I can't figure out. And it was hard, to say, well, why would I hire a mentor? I know everything. I cannot imagine that anybody knows more than me, because I knew everything on an intellectual level, and I thought that was all there's to know, right? And that really turned a corner for me, was really hiring my mentor, learning how to be vulnerable, what we're going to be talking about today, to be authentic and to set boundaries without guilt. And that really helped me to become very congruent inside of myself, attract my man within a couple of months, really. And because, remember, we live in a mirroring universe, because I now was congruent to myself, he also was so congruent that he told me the first night that we met that I'm the girl of his story.
Oh, Brody. So amazing. I just want to share with everyone listening that now you said something really important there, that, you realized that you needed help because you were always so independent, right? And then that also goes towards that you were probably being too independent, so you never allowed a man to contribute to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to share kind of behind the scenes here of we're getting ready to go live with this interview, and there's Brody totally setting up Antia's camera and her audio and making sure everything is good and working. And I'm like, oh my God, what an amazing man. He's so supporting you. But it really just goes to show that how far you've come of being able to receive his support, his love, his help, his contribution. And that is such a big thing that gets in the way of women having the relationship that they want.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And what I hear so often, Tanya, is, well, I need to attract a masculine man first, and then I become feminine. I'm like, girlfriend, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I had to let down my guards first, right? So there's a guy, he studied lobsters, and he actually found out that a woman, a female lobster, not a woman lobster, but a female lobster, before she mates, like she breaks open her shell, like she lets go of her shell. And then after she's being fertilized, the shell hardens again. And I think that really drives home that point that, can you imagine the female lobster would say, well, first you have to be masculine and then I'm going to let down my shell. But the male lobster looks actually for that, right? Like who has like that soft part and who has let down their shell first, and then he picks. So I thought that was like really, really interesting, and so much relates to how it works, right? It doesn't work that way. You can't say you're saying you're masculine in control and you're not being vulnerable until the man is being vulnerable, until the man shows you that he can hold it. Doesn't work that way.
That is such a great analogy. That is one of the coolest analogies I've ever heard. So thank you for sharing that. And I just want to presence everyone, whether you are single or whether you're currently in a relationship, that this is such an important part, a point that, you know, so many times we're wanting our men to show up differently. If you're single, you're wanting a man to come into your life. If you're in relationship, you're like, why doesn't my man help me with anything, you know, and all this. And so it goes in both places where we can all soften to have the men in our lives show up for us for the first time, or if we've been in relationship for years. So I just want to point that out. And if you are someone who is struggling with that, please leave a comment because we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and just share that, because I think, you know, that's an important thing to call yourself out on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the biggest thing what I see, Tanya, is really that fear of losing control. That's the number one thing, the wanting to be right and not being willing to be wrong. And one thing I always say, women always say, well, how do I know when I'm ready? And I said, well, how willing are you to be wrong? That shows you how ready you are for relationship, right? Because, you know, relationship is not about who's right, who's wrong. But I was telling Brody about this. It's really a dynamic. It's not you did this and I did this. And it's like, no, what field are you guys creating together? You're both co-creating this together, right? So at some point, you're both going to be wrong or right. Or, you know, we don't even use those words. Like we're really trying to find different labels even that are not so combative. And so what's the other word? Competitive almost. You know, that's what we really see, that so many women are competing with their man.
Oh my God, that is such a big one for me in my relationship. So many times, just it's a tit for tat, you know, who's right, who's wrong, and we have to constantly be calling ourselves out. And I love that practice of actually renaming that, and to start to practice, you know, getting rid of being right and wrong in the relationship. What other, you know, and what you're mentioning is things that you two are doing to create your field. What's another practice that you and Brody have in your relationship to create that harmonious partnership? Because essentially that's what you're doing. You move beyond relationship into partnership. So can you share a little bit?
Yeah, there's so many. You know, I feel like we really have this like in a way model relationship because we're checking in with our archetypes, right? So like every man and every woman has certain archetypes. You know, there's like the warrior or the worker archetype, and there's the more soft archetype, and there's a wild archetype. So there's different parts of us. And what we make sure is like about every week, more or less, we're really working on checking in every week. We really see where are those archetypes, you know? How much pleasure have you felt this week? Or how much purpose have you lived this week? Or how much are you just like being playful or being like animalistic, just letting go, forgetting that you're human and you can just be and you don't have to hold yourself together. And really that's definitely one. And we always say, you know, so on a scale of 1 to 10, where you're at with that part. And then, so let's say I say, you know, like today, you know, with my wild woman, I'm like level 6. Then Brody would say, well, what would it take to like, you know, I mean, 10 is like, you know, really big, but, you know, even like to an 8 or 9, like what would it take? And so we really see, and we're constantly rebalancing. It's like this plane that's like, I think 80% of the time they're off course. It's the name of the game is really getting back on course, recalibrating every week, you know, because there's different stressors coming into our life, or there's different relationships, or there's different patterns that come out that bring out different patterns inside of us. So I think a big aha moment for us was that not every week is the same. I mean, Tanya, you know that even like 4 times a month, we women are in different cycles, like the moon is in different cycles, right? So there's so many reasons to really do this on a weekly basis. And usually by now we can intuit it, but sometimes I'm still surprised and I'm learning, wow, I wasn't aware that your king didn't feel so purposeful this week, right? That you were more on your worry and you were just working. And I think the biggest thing for us is to hold each other accountable to that, to really say, hey, you said this week you want to play more, go. I'll take care of the business, or I'll do this or that. And you do what you need to do, right? Yeah. To balance those parts inside of yourself again.
So what I'm hearing in this practice, and so I'd love for you to actually share what the archetypes are for those women who are like, what archetypes? So what I'm hearing is this conscious check-in versus making the assumption, right? And while you might be more and more getting to know your partner and intuitively being able to see, you're doing these conscious check-ins around these 4 archetypes to see where you are and how to relate to each other in terms of these 4 archetypes. I also hear a strong level of accountability to be who you both want to be as individuals in the relationship and to be your highest self. And I think that that is so powerful, and why I'm highlighting that, because so many times we get so stuck in just the mundane, you know, I'm very much in this all the time of like, we're just trying to survive sometimes on a daily basis. And so sometimes it can feel like a lot of effort to put in conscious awareness and check-ins and all that. But what I've noticed is when we do, can you share what those 4 archetypes are and what each one would be related to? So I heard king and queen related to your purpose, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So king and queen is really, it's like, they're overseeing the kingdom, right? So how is life overall, right? And also like future plans too. And then there's this part of us that's more like the priestess or the wise woman, right? And for the man, it's called the magician. And that's the part that's really more reads books about different dimensions and listens to their downloads, right? And to their instincts and what they can learn. So for Brody, I know it's reading books. So when he reads books, he's in his magician. He's happy. He's learning. So I feel like for me, okay, the magician equals learning. So when the man is learning, growing through intellectual stimulation, that somehow is the magician. And I feel it's a little bit different than for the woman, because I feel for the woman, for me, it's much more about doing rituals. Yeah. Right? Doing my sacred rituals that brings me back. Okay, I'm feeling more aligned with my higher self that you talked about, right? And then the third part is, of course, the inner boy and the inner girl. Really important, right? So I have like my little magic wand here, you know, so like to have like a little something playful, something that you can bring into the relationship. Or, you know, we went to Disney on Ice last weekend, like that, right? And not just that we go there, but really thinking, okay, who's your favorite princess and who's your favorite prince? And we watched all the little girls dance around and just really fully like engage into that experience and remembering, gosh, do you remember when you were 4, you know, like how excited would you be, right? Like to be in first row, Disney on Ice. Yeah. Elsa looks at you. And I feel that's actually where a lot of women are afraid to go into, because they need to be so competent, or they had a very painful experience like me. And every time when they were going into their light, so to say, like with me, when I was singing, when I was dancing, my mom would always say, oh, not you again, right? And so I think that is like so important to go into, and really to find a partner who supports that. Because I really will tell you, Tanya, that Brody's the first man who supports that, like who really loves that. When I go into his room and I just say, yippee! And then I just go back into my room. And it's just like this little spontaneous outburst of joy. And that's it. It doesn't have to take long. It doesn't have to like go on forever. But it's just, I let my light shine and now I go back to work. And so let's see. And then we'll have the wild part of us, the wild woman, the wild man. And that's what I said before. And that's why I brought the lobster, like just really more the animal part inside of us, right? And Brody just did a wild man video for wild women. It's about like letting go of all the boundaries. I think we women set up so many boundaries and so much structure for ourselves. And how much do you just allow ourselves to let go? You know, like to just be, like don't think about anything and just be, scream, dance, jump, you know, whatever. I did one workshop where I was literally the lioness, right? And so they were holding space for me to be this lioness until I didn't have a voice anymore. And then I turned into a snake because I had to do that, shh, you know, because the voice was gone. So I could only do shh. But I think that's really important too, to check in with those parts, because especially for the wild man, that part is actually the most masculine. in men. And so when we women are, I have so much to say about that, but when we women are afraid of that part in a man, because there's this whole movement, now I won't get into all the details, but there's this whole thing like don't overstep boundaries and fear of abuse and this and that. And I feel like in that process, the wild man is being made wrong. And I feel like, gosh, the wild man can protect me. Like if an intruder would come in, the wild man would kill, right? Yeah. Because and I feel safe with my man because he has the strong wild man. So to really see that, yeah, the wild man can be used for abuse, but the wild man can also be used for protection and for us feeling extremely safe as women and softening more. Mm. So those are the 4 archetypes.
Amazing. And if you're watching this, go ahead and leave a comment and share with us which one feels the most edgy or challenging for you. Is it to be in your queen, your priestess, your little girl, your maiden, or your wild woman? So go ahead and post that. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you for sharing that. I think that's just such a beautiful practice, and it just shows just the capacity that you both have and just the work that you've done. And I just love it. Earlier you were talking about attachment theory. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to actually circle back to that and have you share a little bit about the different, some of us think about attachment parenting style, and there's actually how you show up in relationship. And I think this could be helpful for women who are either trying to find their man or are currently in relationship and things are kind of a little rocky.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about the attachment?
And I'm so happy to do that, Tanya, because when I watch dating shows and I see other experts, I always see that awareness is not there, right? That awareness is not there. And so I was like a recovered anxious attachment style. So there's 3 major attachment styles, a lot of subcategories, but for, obviously for the simplicity, we'll just like stick with the main 3. And so the first one is the anxious attachment style. And the anxious attachment style is really created by a mom being irregular with her response to the baby. So sometimes she fed the baby and sometimes she didn't. And so for the baby, it becomes a gamble, right? So now baby lives in anticipation and I don't know when mom's going to feed me again, right? So actually their anxiety is going to grow. And guess what that translates to into romantic relationships? Is he going to call me? Is he not going to call me, right? And then because our system can't handle that after a while, we're already assuming, because that's the other piece that the anxious wants to do. It wants to create a lot of certainty, as much certainty as it can, because it can't be in that uncertainty, because that was that devastating experience as a baby, right? Not knowing, am I going to get food today? Am I going to survive? Because that's how far the baby went, is totally dependent on the caregiver. So with a woman with an anxious attachment style, she's probably already aware of it. She attracts men who are moving away from her, who are not responding to her in a regular way. Well, I kind of talking to her, and then I just have a client right now, 19 days later, text her back, right? And I said, ignore. It's not even worth responding. I mean, it's, and the other piece too is to really pay attention to, don't live so much in anticipation and really just enjoy the date as it is. Don't think how the second date is going to go, if your last name is going to sound good after his first name and things like that. So that's like a mistake that the anxious makes, right? Now we're going to contrast that with the avoidant. The avoidant is the complete opposite. So what happened to the avoidant? It never got any response from mama. So what that means is like it became really independent. And as a matter of fact, moved away from intimacy as fast as it can, right? Because basically baby knew and really went through an even more devastating experience than the anxious, because the anxious at least got fed here and there, right? And also with attention too, not just like with food itself, but also with attention and love. And so anyway, so that particular person is, when it gets close to intimacy, it pulls away. And so oftentimes what happens is the anxious and the avoidant meet each other and become each other's worst nightmare. Because the avoidant is exactly what the anxious is afraid of, and vice versa. The anxious is exactly what the avoidant is afraid of. because the avoidant doesn't want to feel trapped. And it really feels nervous. It literally feels fear the closer it gets to intimacy. And then, of course, the golden middle is the secure. You know, a mom who like really consistently responded to the baby, and also filled it up with acknowledgement, with love, with affection. So that baby grows up. I'm worthy. I'm worthy to express my desires. My voice needs to be heard, right? My voice means something, right? My emotions have importance and significance. So that's what a secure grows up with. And so the work of the anxious and the avoidant is to move closer to secure. Now, will they ever completely become secure? Probably not, but they will get much, much closer to a secure, where they become more and more aware of the patterns that they're running, and they're able to soothe themselves. So yeah, so the goal of the anxious is to like, so for example, when you, a secure, for example, goes on a date and then she comes home and does her thing. Like she's not thinking about it. She's not overanalyzing it. She's able to transition in other areas of her life. The anxious is not able to do that. An anxious comes home after the date and she still thinks about the date. And she calls the friend about the date and she calls everyone about the date and analyzes everything, right? And why does he not text me back? And the avoidant is completely disconnected, right? The avoidant is like, I need space. I need a week break right now. That was pretty intimate.
Yeah.
So I hope so that makes a little bit more clarity.
Yeah.
What category, what camp you're probably in, based on some of the examples that I brought.
So Rami just said, this is so helpful. Rami, I'm wondering if you can find yourself in that. Are you anxious, or are you an avoidant, or are you secure? I think for me, I'm definitely more on the anxious than avoidant for sure. I would say Brent's more on the avoidant, but I think both of us have definitely come much more towards being secure. Antia, what about you? Anxious to secure?
Same thing. Yeah. Brody was an avoidant.
Which most men, I think.
Yeah, it depends. So, and then also, Tanya, it really depends because, so Brody was a secure, but then he became an avoidant in teenagerhood because his mom was like really controlling, and probably unconsciously he became a little bit avoidant before he became a teenager, but really consciously not wanting to be trapped, wanting to get out of the house as fast as possible, and just really having his heart closed, right? Until he experienced his first heartbreak, and realizing, no, that's not what I want. Mm-hmm. I want something different, right? So it also depends on when do you experience that trapped feeling. So for a male teenager, like he can come avoidant because of that. So it was actually not because he didn't get any response from the mom, but it was the opposite. He got just over smothered, right? I mean, just really, even to this day, I mean, just sent his mom love and everything. But in terms of his attachment style for man, and we see that you're supposed to actually let go. When they're 12 years old, you're supposed to not cuddle with them anymore because they need to start to grow into their healthy sense of masculinity. So there's a lot of things his mom was not aware of. And of course, I'm an anxious based on, what I, of course, shared.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you used that example of both because like Rami just posted, yeah, she feels like she's both. I think a lot of us can identify with both and how you can move from one to the other, and just based on how you were raised from childhood and then teenage years. So thank you. That was super helpful. So I'd love for you to share where you're at right now. And, last year, such a beautiful commitment ceremony that you and Brody did. And I'm sharing this because I think that for those of you who are in relationship, to have that annual renewal of your vows, Brett and I also do this, but how you guys did it was so beautiful, where we all got together and you read your vows, and then you had a circle of your friends go around and share different reflections. So it was like we were witnessing you guys, and you made like a fun party out of it. It was so beautiful. And that one of the things that you're stepping into is babies, getting pregnant.
Yay! Lots of Disney on Ice experiences.
Right? Like getting more in touch with your inner girl.
Yeah.
So, and I know that there's some stuff there for you as well. And I just want you to share, this next edge for you, because I think it would be really helpful to share
definitely.
where you're at. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's always the new level of learning and what we uncover. And I think for me, for the longest time, really, I've always had this kind of, okay, if I meet a man who wants babies, I'm going to have babies. But if I meet a man who doesn't want babies, okay, fine, I'm not going to have babies, because I didn't really learn on a body level, right? Obviously, logically, I see it with my friends. But on a systematic level, I never learned what it means to be mothered, right? And I told so many of my friends, I don't even know if I know how to be a mom, like I just know to be left alone and be on my own, and I don't know anything else. And I think that was like a huge resistance for me. And then what happened was, because I didn't have that childhood, I then provided it for myself, like stepping into that inner girl, and now moving from that, being like, how can I be in my inner girl, but also be a mom too? Because that's definitely a concern that comes up for me. And I feel my inner girl being really terrified, because she's like, we're finally connected. And now there's going to be a baby, and, your husband is going to watch the baby. We just talked about babies this morning, like, what he's going to do if the baby keeps crying, how he's going to do all this research. And so I can tell he's like already all energetically over the baby, right? And of course, like, I hear my inner girl saying, well, what about me? What about me? And I think that's like a big piece of work for me now, is really to be a mom and to still maintain and have those parts of me balance and have paid attention to, so that I can be the best mom, because I can actually be a much better caretaker, mom, friend, anything, when my inner girl is filled up, right? So I think that's a huge thing for me. And I definitely feel also like, because unconsciously I had all this independence, that there is this fear of, I cannot imagine it yet, because I don't, but I watched it with friends, it's going to be so interesting to see, okay, I always have to cater to the baby. And what if I need a break? What if I want a break? I'm used to just being able to do that. I'm used to just be able to close the door, go on a walk, go on a trip, send Brody on a trip, whatever. And we both love our freedom, right? So I think those are two big pieces that are coming up for us. But then at the same time, evolution, but we call it like play evolving together, right? Playfully evolving. That's really like at the top of our hierarchy, So we're willing to go into that unknown and take one step at a time, right? Really just one day at a time. Like, we don't have to have it all figured out. And it feels good to talk about that, because we'll always have that next level of vulnerability and fear. And no matter how much of an expert you are, no matter how happy you are in your relationship, it's, I'm excited, I'm nervous, I fear, and it feels good to like do it anyways, because that's what I tell my clients. It's like, yeah, you're going to feel nervous going out, or you feel nervous saying yes to this guy, or allowing someone in, but you're also going to grow, and you're also going to experience this big love. And, that's like my edge, but, I love edges. Like, I love growth, and my unconscious loves edges.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's so definitely.
And I think that's why you and I get along so well, is because we're both vulnerable and willing to go there. And I just think it goes to show that, and what I found in the work that Brett and I have been doing, is the more that we're willing to get vulnerable in our relationship, the closer you become, the more intimacy you create, the more powerful your relationship becomes. And
yeah.
So and you are demonstrating that. Like, there's a lot of vulnerability in your relationship, and it just shows that, you know, you guys have an amazing relationship that a lot of people look up to, uh, because both of you are so conscious, and you're constantly working at it. So thank you for being a role model.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that, Tanya. And I see so much the same in you too. You know, just really want to acknowledge that too, and want you to receive that, because you're also such a powerful role model as well. Because you are ahead, you have kids, and I see how. Because all I know is how it is now. It's great, and it's all flowers and roses, and how's it gonna be when we have the first baby, right? So that's why I like look at you and see how you balance things. So you're a role model to me too. You know, when I look at that, like, okay, your relationship is gonna be fine, and there's gonna be moments, but you're gonna recover. And
Yep.
because remember, as an anxious, I'm like, in future, that part of me to feel safe and secure, right? But the last piece I want to say is, I think the secret to Brody in my relationship is that whatever we're afraid of, so my inner girl is afraid of being like left alone, right? So I sent him on a recharge retreat. So I lean into what she is like afraid of, because remember, separation means I don't know if mommy's going to feed me again, right?
Yep.
So I need to always be fed. I always need to have my partner with me, and for me to do the opposite and say, go do your thing, go to your recharge retreat, go into the woods, whatever you want to do. That's, I think, is a big secret, to lean into what you're afraid the most, what you're resisting the most, and empower your partner to do the same. And guess what? Your partner will do that for you in turn as well. And that's the nice surprise.
Yes. And I would say that's the key. When you have kids, that you continue to take time for yourself, and you continue to take time as a partnership, as a couple, and you'll be good. You built such a beautiful foundation. It's gonna be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, we're together for almost 5 years now. So I'm thinking, you know what? Some people are together for like a year and they're just making it work. You know, we're like, okay, we have a lot of knowledge about each other, to have like an understanding, you know, and to work with each other. So yeah, we'll see.
So if the ladies today are interested in getting in touch with you, I don't know if you have a link that you want to give us, or a resource.
Yeah. So if you really feel that's a lean in for you and you're resonating what we shared here in the last about 30 minutes, I invite you to come on a Magnetize the Man clarity call with me, where we get crystal clear of what your blind spots are. Look, I didn't know mine. You don't know yours. We don't know what we don't know. And really creating a structure that works for you, because like I said before, you're not going to completely recover, but you're going to work yourself towards a more secure part of you, that you attract a man who's equally worked himself to that part as well. You always attract your mirror. So for that, hop on over to magnetizetheman.com and grab your slots, as long as they last. I will say that, as long as they last.
And I will post that link as well, magnetizetheman.com. Perfect, easy. One of the things that Antia does with Brody is they critique the dating shows, and some hilarious stuff. So if you want to follow her on Facebook, and you can watch their critiques of the dating shows, it's pretty great, using exactly what you're just talking about, the attachment styles. So yeah, thank you so much, Antia, for being here and sharing your joy and sharing your vulnerability and your wisdom today. So appreciate you, sister. Thank you.
I appreciate you too, Tanya. It's always such a magical space and fields that I feel when we come together.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone. And tune in next time.